listening to the Savvy Musician Show with Leah McHenry, and this is your secret weapon for success in the new music industry.
Well, welcome once again to the Savvy Musician Show. This is CJ Ortiz, and I'm the Mindset and Branding Coach here at the Savvy Musician Academy. And once again, joined by my dear friend, the Queen herself, Leah McHenry. How you doing, Leah?
Fantastic. How are you?
Wonderful. Well, this is a special podcast today. I'm really excited about it because this will be the first time that Leah and I get the chance to do an interview together. She's done a number of these in the previous podcast, and bringing me on was to make her more the focus. And so now we get to kind of tag team and get to ask someone else. And so I'm excited about our guest today. Leah, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about who she is?
Yeah, we are excited to have Suzanne Paulinski here. And I'm going to be talking to her about some very important things. And I think you will all appreciate this episode because the topic that we're about to get into is her area of expertise. And it's something you guys ask me about all the time. Like every day I get questions about stuff to do with work-life balance, time management, productivity, all of that. Leah, how do you do it with the 5 kids and running the music business and SMA? How are you doing all this stuff? Well, Suzanne is an expert on this, and she specifically helps musicians and creative people master this area of their lives. So we're really excited to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm a big fan and I'm honored to be here.
Great. Well, tell us a little bit like how you got into coaching people on productivity and work-life balance, and how did you get into it, and what do you exactly do?
Sorry about that. So I've been in the business a little over 15 years. I started at the major labels here in New York City. I worked at Atlantic, and then I went to work for EMI Astroworks, which was Fatboy Slim's label at the time. And I'm not a performer. I mean, I've had experience performing in high school and stuff like that, but that's never how I saw myself. And so I just figured, well, if I'm not a performer, then I must need to be a manager or A&R or something. I studied music business in college, and even then it was still limited in terms of scope of like, here are your options. So I just assumed, well, I'm not a performer, I must be working at a label. And I did sales for a while, and my accounts were Sam Goody and Virgin Megastore and Tower Records. And within a year of me working there, they were all starting to close down. MySpace was growing, and Napster was everywhere. And so it was just a very odd time in the music industry. And so I realized it's not what I wanted to do. So I started a company with my college roommate, and that went through a bunch of changes. And then I realized I'm not fitting in anywhere with what I love to do on the business side of things. So let me take a break. Let me go back. Whenever I get stuck, I like to go back to school and to learn new things and try to open my mind to new experiences. So I went back for my master's in psychology, and that's when it really clicked. I was like, this is what I love to do. I know that my clients need help with these things. And so I said, okay, I'm going to start a music therapy business. And then I started promoted, and everyone was like, I don't need therapy. Like, that's silly. I'm fine. I write music, my therapy. And it was still very taboo to talk about. Mental health wasn't really being talked about. So then I started to change it and figured, okay, I'll promote time management and goal setting. But really, both of those are so rooted in mental health and mindset. So when I work with clients, yes, we talk about time management. We absolutely talk about how to navigate the industry while maybe you have a day job or children or all of the above. But the root of those things and the root of why they may not be taking advantage of their free time or why they might be stuck on something is all psychological. It's all your mindset and stuff you might be struggling. So that's kind of how it came up. And, it's nice to see more and more people are starting to talk about mental health more. There are more coaches coming out that once they realize there is a market for this, there have been more coaches that have opened up shop. And I love that because it's just showing how important it is. And we're all creating a nice community of support for these musicians.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, I could testify to that really, because I've watched it from a different vantage point, Suzanne. Because I do this thing called metal motivation, so it's really more focused on just general audiences, no matter what their particular profession is. But obviously, you're going to get a lot of musicians because you're focusing on that aspect. But yeah, it's been such a thing to see, because it has at the same time sort of elevated the DIY approach to things. The technology kind of puts that, it's exciting, but also very frightening for a lot of people, because they're realizing, well, okay, it's great and the technology really is powerful, but oh my goodness, I've got to become such a master of so many things. And they tend to look almost exclusively at the technology, not necessarily at the psychology. And like you said, it's probably the number one thing that does hinder them.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you find, like, when you're working with all different kinds of musicians, what's the one common thread that you find in all of them, regardless of what their particular situation is?
Yeah, it's a lot of as to what Chris said, it's this overwhelm. It's, now we see, okay, I don't need a label, but that means I need to do everything myself. And, even when they say to me, I say, what's your goal? To get signed by a label. Why? Because they'll do things for me. And it's like, well, that's not really how it works. And, there is not a whole lot of artist development anymore these days through the labels, at least the major ones. So, getting them to, again, shift that perspective of what the industry looks like. And a lot of it is because they think, well, if my goal is not to get signed by a label and I'm doing everything myself, as you had said, it's like there's too much going on. I can't be an expert in social media and in marketing and sales and in my music and in, fan engagement and building my mailing list. And, there's too many things. And so, what I help them do is to just breathe and prioritize and understand, yes, you should know a little bit about all of these things, enough so that you can delegate it to somebody else and explain to them what you want them to do, how you want them to carry it out. You need to still be the captain steering the ship of your brand, but that you can build a team and that you don't have to have, hundreds of thousands of dollars pouring in to do it. You can start small, and even just by getting a virtual assistant who may not even be in the music industry to do some initial research for you or schedule your social media posts or any of those things. So a lot what happens when they come to me, and I work with managers and booking agents as well, is overwhelmed, because as this industry changes, we're responsible for a whole lot more than we used to be. So it's a lot to manage.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I know this firsthand, because I am that musician in that position,
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, my thought is that, like you said, they are doing everything themselves. And on one hand, here's the thing. I tell musicians, like, you don't need to be an expert in all things marketing and copywriting and landing pages and funnels. You just need to be an expert at marketing your own music, right? And so if you learn the fundamentals of some of these things, it's not as intimidating as you think, right? And it is about prioritizing. And the other thought that came to mind is, like, there's a lot of musicians probably even listening to this podcast. I mean, they're nowhere near ready to build a team yet. And like you said, they actually need to know enough about it to know even what to delegate, first of all. And second of all, when they have delegated it, are they even doing a good job? So they need to know enough to be able to determine those things. And at that point, and so even at my level here, and I have so a long ways to go in my career. Like, I feel like I'm just scratching the surface. I'm just getting started. In my business, I have a full-time assistant and I have a full-time customer support person in my music business, not Savvy Musician Academy.
Yeah.
It's a team of 3. And now outside of that, I will contract outside of that. And of course, I don't do everything myself, and even in my music I'm not mixing and mastering. Hell no. That's not my area of expertise. Why would I do that? Right. So I just made people, I think sometimes when they think I have to do everything myself, they're taking on everything themselves. It's just like, you don't need to do that. You know, I actually heard I forget what the name of the painter was. I just heard it. I was listening to an audiobook this morning about a painter. I have to remember the name. And he became, at first he was doing all these amazing paintings in, it was in England himself. And then he started delegating out certain parts of the paintings because he became really well known for just painting the faces. And so when the royal, whatever it was, the queen or whatever, hired them to do the paintings on, inside the buildings, he just worked on the faces and he had assistants do the rest of it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. That's a perfect example. We'll have to do another show on this when I can remember who it is. Perfect example of, doing the things that only you can do, delegating some of the other things, but it's still under your brand and under your, oversight. I just love that example. So how do you help people accomplish things like that?
Sure. So, one of the first things I like to do, one of my favorite exercises is to just do a mind dump. We carry around so much in our heads on a daily basis, and especially if you're a parent, there's just so much going on. And so I have them just mind dump onto a piece of paper, because taking pen or pencil to paper is very effective, and it just unlocks certain pieces of your brain. And I just say, okay, what's in your head, get it all out so that you can let go of it, and that you're not going to forget it. It's down on paper. But we'll have thoughts swirling around of like 5-year plans and things we have to do tomorrow, and the laundry and buying groceries and all these other things, and they're all jumbled in our head together. And then we feel that kind of rise of panic and overwhelm of there's so much to do, but it's not organized in our brains. So dump it all out. Then I like to take a fresh piece of paper and pick out from that list, what are the immediate things, and they can be personal. It can be, I need to get groceries for dinner tonight. I have to get on top of my laundry. It's out of control. And it can be all of those things, because your music career, for instance, and I'm sure you come across this a lot, it's, as you build your music career, yes, you want to, there's all these social media platforms, and yes, you could be a YouTube star or an Instagram influencer or have a great thriving Facebook group. But especially if you don't have a team, you're not going to do all of those right now. So pick something, so when you get that all on paper, like I have to monetize my YouTube channel, and I have to figure out how to get my Insta stories more consistent, and I have to grow my Facebook group, and you're going to put on the piece of paper, pick one and start picking out things that you could take action on now. Maybe you've already started a Facebook group and you've got more members, and maybe your YouTube you haven't even touched. So just focus on Facebook right now then, if that's kind of already got some momentum. And then once you have like your priority piece of paper down, then you're going to what I always say is monotask and microtask. So again, to bring the overwhelm down, it's kind of counterintuitive because you think I never have time in the day, so I got to do everything at once. But it's so counterproductive. So if you just do one thing at a time and put less things on your plate, you'll get more done faster. So then on the third piece of paper, microtasking it out. And what I mean by that is YouTube, for example, if you had on your list, I have to upload a new video. Well, did you film the video yet? Somebody like you or I might do, a tutorial on something. So do we need a script? Do we need to set up the camera and the lights and the mic? We need to write a title and a caption and figure out the hashtags and write some social media posts for it and record it and edit it and then upload it. Like, there are all these micro tasks within that one thing. So if we can break it down, then when you say, I have no time, but you're sitting at the doctor's office waiting for your kid to finish their exam, or you're on the train going to work to your day job that you hate, but the train gets stuck and you're there for 30 minutes. Sure, you can't film the YouTube video, but you could write the script, or you could write an outline, or come up with the social media posts. If you start to see that, I have time to get started on some of these things, rather than look at your list and say, well, I don't have 4 hours to do a YouTube video, so can't do that today. And so I just work with them to try to break things down and really understand the components of what they're trying to do. Because as humans, we don't respond to vagueness. And so when we see something that's vague, we just avoid it. So getting as specific as possible with your to-do list can be really helpful.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I often tell people in my group that, you know, you can get so focused on the size of the mountain that you miss how easy it is to take one step. You know? And it is, the overwhelm is, like you said, it is all psychological. And the piece of paper is so helpful. I'll often say that, I'll write things down on a piece of paper because at least it puts me in a position where I can look down on something. There's something about that posture, and I guess if it's also on paper, it's not necessarily crowding the mind space. But it is literally an overwhelming thing. Do you find, though, that the problem gets compounded because of something like, for example, the fear of success? And just, if we just define it in terms of, like, the fear of that added responsibility, the fear of putting yourself out there and being criticized, especially for creatives, I know that's a big deal. It's got to be something you encounter a lot yourself, right?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you said fear of success, because so many say fear of failure, and we're not afraid of failure. We'll take that any day of the week because we're comfortable with it. We
Right.
know what that looks like. No matter what you're aiming for, failure is always going to feel the same no matter what. But when your goals are different, each time it's higher, or each time it's a new thing, success is always going to feel unknown because you've never been at that next level. So
Right.
we fear the unknown, and that success is what's unknown to us in each step of the way. And so, yeah, I encounter that constantly, and a lot of it. And as you were basically explaining, fraud talk, which is that imposter syndrome of, I'm not good at this, somebody else is going to do it better, people are going to say nasty things about me online, and we talk ourselves out of things. The microtasking also helps break it down, like you said, taking that first step up the mountain. And what I also like to do with them is to do an exercise to look back at what you've already accomplished that you never thought you did. And even if you think you haven't accomplished anything, I bet when you were little, you didn't think you could tie your shoes, or you never thought you'd learn how to ride a bike, or, there are always certain things that we overcome, but we forget that. We
Yeah.
forget to celebrate the small wins. So I'm a big proponent of, number one, always being in a place of gratitude, and definitely being thankful for what you already have, but to also celebrate the small wins. So if you're in a bad spot right now and you got up out of bed today, that's awesome. And if you were able to put on a clean set of clothes and go outside and take on the day, even if it didn't go your way, that's awesome. Celebrate that. Like, each time you can celebrate something, even if it's sometimes, if I'm really scared to start something, I'll add to my list things I've already done, like brush my teeth, ate breakfast, walk the dog, just so I can start crossing things off. And then I'm like, oh, I like that feeling, I want to continue that. I think that's a big thing, is that, as you said, we look at the mountain, and there are so many things that we do that we take for granted that we should be celebrating.
Yeah, we have a very, very similar perspective. It's almost scary. Because I'll often tell my people, we got to celebrate the little victories. And I said, just like, and it may seem, I tell them, you clear off your desk, or you rearrange a space, or you clean out a closet, to really get excited about that, make a big deal about it. And they said, well, why would you make a big deal about it? Well, I said, it's, I had small kids at one time, and we made a big deal when they first ate their broccoli. That was a big deal. So we, what I mean? When they first did it, we're like, yay, you ate your broccoli. Because then we wanted to associate that this was a big accomplishment, And so you do, because you didn't get to this lack of confidence overnight. It wasn't a single event that gave you a traumatic experience. It's the adding up of little defeats. So you reverse engineer that to say, okay, well, let's add up a new thing, just a multiplicity of little victories to create this greater sense of self-confidence. They want it so fast. And I understand, because the democratization of media means you can get started today. You can launch that YouTube channel today, and that's kind of frightening. And I guess there is that security in something like a label, because it's like, okay, well, there's already a process in place, and there's people in place, and there's other people that they're going to have to do all that. That's now all on me. So it kind of also gives you a bunch of stuff to stay busy with and not have to put yourself out there.
And I've noticed the other thing is too, and it all gets tied into fear of success, but if it's a label, and they mess up, or your album doesn't sell, or your show doesn't sell out, well, they messed up. That's not on you. So if you can build a team, and when things go wrong, you're so willing to just be like, well, they messed up. Well, first of all, no matter what team you have or what label signs you, the buck still ends with you. Right. So, no matter what, it's going to be your brand and your name and your career that's at stake. So a label's not going to make that go away, but that's what we tell ourselves. And another thing is the decision fatigue. And I'm actually writing a book on that now is, when musicians just, oh, can't you just do it? Can't you do it for me? You know this stuff. Just tell me what to do. And it's like, well, I don't know because I'm not chasing your dream. Like, you need to make the decision. But I just did a podcast episode on this recently where it's just when we have so many decisions to make all the time, constantly, day after day, you're not only, many of our friends and family might go to a job and their boss says, I need this by this time and here's the work and just do it. But as a musicpreneur, you have to invent the work, create the work, set the deadlines, carry out the work, fix the work, promote the work. Like, there's so many decisions along the way that we do get fatigued. And so when we're not monotasking, when we're multitasking, or we're doing so many different things at once, trying to get it all done in a rush, you're actually contextually shifting. And that contextual shifting, like, say, creating your social media graphics while you're also writing your newsletter, while you're also taking a call, and your brain is doing so many different contextual tasks at once, then you're exhausting yourself on top of that. So, there's a whole lot of things that go into this, and which is why monotasking is so important. And the last thing I'll say about it is, when we do all that stuff, another thing I like to tell people is, okay, I get that you're trying to be productive. What's better, and you'll see this once you start microtasking out your list, you'll start to see things that you can batch together. And when you batch things, that means you're taking things that use the same contextual focus. Like, maybe you need graphics for your CD release, but you also need it for something else you're promoting, and you also need it for your YouTube cover photos, and you also, fine, you have different projects you might be working on, but they all need graphics. Then do all the graphics. Do all the graphics at once. If there are a bunch of videos you want to film, set up the camera, lights, and microphone one time, and then record all of them, but then edit them all separately, or delegate the editing to somebody else. Don't constantly shift back and forth between different types of mental focuses, because that's going to exhaust you and overwhelm you very quickly.
Man, I can really relate to what you just said there, because in fact, with me running two businesses, my music business and then SMA, I've learned this. That's exactly what I've learned, that I cannot context switch between, even if I'm working on, I'm working on a new album right now, I do not work on my album in the morning and then work on Savvy Musician Academy later in the same day, because it's a completely different frame of mind, different mindset, all of it. So what we've done right now, and this, I don't recommend running two businesses, by the way, it's really hard. But it's the way we've done it is, I have literally full designated days for music, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Right now it's because I'm working on an album. Those days are all in. I'm all in music. There's nothing else on my schedule at all except work on that. And there's a lot. So that could be anything music related. So whether working on my album or music business or my e-commerce shop, all of it, it's that brand that I'm working on. And then the other days of the week, it's only Savvy Musician Academy. I'm coaching, I'm podcasting, creating content, writing emails, all of it, all in. And that helps me because I wake up and I can be focused and I'm in a certain mindset. I can mentally prepare before I go into the day and the night before. I just found that made a huge world of difference. And then I even do the same thing. I want to talk about your experience with musicians who have children, because that's a lot of us. But we do a lot of batching in terms of, you just think meal prep as well. So we do some meal prep on Sundays. I love the Instapot. I don't know if you're Instant Pot or Instapot. I don't know, but it's like a pressure cooker. We just do all the chicken at once, and then it goes in the fridge or the freezer. So that kind of thing, it really, really helps. It just categorize these different things and then batch them. It makes a big difference.
Absolutely. And yeah, I love that you time block. because that's a big thing of what I teach. And I'm also happy to share, I have a free audio tutorial on how to time block, and I'm happy to share that with your audience. It's basically taking all of that stuff and saying it, like, boundaries give you freedom. That's what I say all the time.
Yeah.
And if you, again, helping your decision fatigue, if you're somebody that feels like, I don't want to make another decision, time blocking, which is basically what you described, is so important, because I always say too, there's like the shiny object syndrome. And I see musicians constantly where they're working on something, and then but they've got their email open, and then an email comes along and says, hey, I need this. Oh, okay. And they drop what they're doing, and then they go do that, because
Oh my gosh.
we've learned with technology in the last 15 years is this false urgency. Everything is urgent.
Yes.
I hear a beep and I must respond to it right now. And it's like, really? Because I remember life without cell phones, and when you left the office, they couldn't reach you. Like, that was it. And so, you know, this is a job, and as much as you love it and it's a passion, and maybe you know, whether you have kids or not, you wish you could, you know, devote 24/7 to it. That's not realistic. And it's also it's not sustainable for your health, but also for your creativity. So you need to close the books on that and walk away from what you're doing. So if you say to yourself, like I do the same thing with my business, I say, okay, clients, I only work with clients on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And obviously if something happens and it's important, they need to, you know, schedule a call on a Tuesday, okay, we work that out. But if somebody says to me, hey, I'd love to hop on a call with you, when are you free? I say, well, here's my Calendly link, and pick one, and there'll be Monday, Wednesday, and Friday available that they can choose from, you know, rather than say, I don't know what's better for you, and then I turn myself into a pretzel. So, you know, I think doing that and saying no to things and saying, I'll answer, you know, I'll look at emails once in the morning and once at night, and that's it, you know, and giving yourself that permission is a huge game changer. And that's definitely something that I say to my clients who have children, where it's, you know, I tell them to schedule it just as if they would have another day job too. It's like being a parent is a job. It's a full-time job. And you have to carve out, okay, here are my time for my kids and my family. Here's what I'm responsible for. And I walk through that in the time blocking exercise. First goes on, what are your responsibilities? Where are you needed and when? And then in that free time, we plan in a 24-hour day. We don't have a 24-hour day. You have maybe a 4-hour day. And what happens is you plan for a 24-hour day. I'm so sorry about that. You plan for a 24-hour day. You get disappointed because you didn't get half your stuff done. And it's not because you're not good enough. It's because you were just being unrealistic. You can't stop the time continuum. You have to work within a realistic schedule. And once you start blocking out your schedule, you realize, oh, I can only really get one extra task done tomorrow. Let me plan for that and finish it and feel good, because I was realistic. And if there's one meme I hate more than anything out there, it's you have the same 24 hours as Beyonce, because you absolutely do not. Beyonce doesn't even have 24 hours in a day. And she has an endless stream of people helping her to be the incredible person that she is. So it's just
she's a massive team.
Yeah, it's unrealistic and it's unhealthy for us to say, I'm not Beyonce yet, so I must not want it badly enough. It's like, no, what she sleeps, believe me, she gets a full night rest, believe me. So, you know, it's just you can't compare apples to oranges in that way.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh, you said so many things there that I resonate with, and even just like the shiny object syndrome problem. Wow. I mean, I feel like everybody has that a little bit, like even with social media, like anybody can reach us at any time all day long. Like it's even hard for me because, you know, I log into Facebook, my personal account, and I have all the notifications, not just from my personal life, but from all my students, all my Facebook groups, like my fans on top of that. So there's so much going on. Like I have to put, I mean, that's actually a weakness of mine. It's like I go to log in for personal reasons, and then there's all this non-personal stuff. There's work and fun and music and everything there. That we are just inundated with this. And then the other shiny object syndrome I see a lot is with programs. Like, I mean, I feel it myself, but like I try to tell my students, if you're going through a program, just focus on that one program. Don't get sidetracked with like signing up for another program or even another one of my other programs. Like do one at a time. Just stay focused. One of our students, actually it was Lauren, she came up with the acronym, what is it? FTFC, follow the freaking course. Because because just, she shared the story on our coaching call, but just because we're so easily sidetracked. We're so easily like go off, the path that we know we're supposed to be on. So man, I resonate with a lot of what you're saying, that shiny object syndrome, man, yeah, this is full of good stuff here. Can you?
And as you said, yeah, I've actually turned students away if I ask them how many other courses are you currently signed up for, and I'll say, because I don't want you to get crappy results from working with me, and you're not going to get the results you want if you've already committed to other things. So yeah, I totally feel that.
Yeah, for sure. Can you speak a little bit on specifics of musicians who do have kids? I can chime in as well, but like, what are the main obstacles that you're finding with people that have like kids, or like maybe they're in school full time, or they have like a lot of obligations, but music, like they have to do music. So what's the main piece of advice you have for them?
Yeah, it's a two-parter. There with those types of clients, they usually it's a lot of guilt mixed with a lot of resentment, and then it's an endless cycle of then I feel guilty for being resentful, and then it's like this whole big thing. Instead of, again, realizing you can still have the career. It might not be, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize this would be happening.
We can't really hear that much on this
good,
end, don't worry.
Oh, good. But understanding, again, you can still make progress. You're already being very unrealistic about how fast that progress is going to happen. So rather than being so consumed with, it's going to take me longer, it's going to take me longer. Yeah, it probably will, but you'll do it, rather than sitting there complaining that it's going to take you longer and you haven't taken that first step yet. If you can get a schedule down where you're, maybe most people could have 6 hours in a day to give to their career, maybe you only have 1 or 2. But if you can commit to that and be boundaried with that and treat that as sacred time, treat it like it is your own child, then that will work. And I think with the guilt, I always talk about the oxygen mask principle. We've been on planes before, and they say when the oxygen mask comes down, even if a baby is next to you, you put your mask on first, because you have to be able to help them. And if you're gasping for air and you're running out of breath, you're not going to be able to help them correctly. So it's the same thing where it's our instinct, especially as women, I have to say, I notice this so much more with my female clients. It's, let me drop that. It's not that important. Let me help them. But then the resentfulness comes up, and it's like, yes, because we have to be able to give ourselves permission to want what we want and draw that boundary. And, both my parents worked, and my mom went back to school after I was born and I was already in daycare. And she would have to bring me to class sometimes and, tell me to be quiet in the back of the room and sit there. And then she'd have to come home, and she needed that night out with her girlfriend. So she'd say, you're with your grandma or you're with your dad tonight, and I'm going out. And no matter how much we cried and we wanted her, it's like, no, this is my time. I'm entitled to it. And this is what I'm going to go do. And I think as parents in general, I think it's important to have that. And obviously every stage of being a parent, maybe you have infants, maybe you have teenagers, the responsibilities are going to be different, but you can still find something to draw a boundary around and say, this is my time, because you're also going to be a great example to your kids going after what you're passionate about. And you're going to be a better parent because you're happier, you're fulfilled, and it just has such a great domino effect.
Yeah, that does really. You're a better version of yourself.
Right.
There's a good reason for you to succeed and do what it is that you want to do with your life, because you're so much easier to live with. You have so much more to give, right? You'll be so much more encouraging, so much more of an example, et cetera. There's nothing but incentive to do that. And I think you're dead right to say that this is a handicap for a lot of women, especially once they get into that wife and mother role, because it is so in your nature to put others above yourself. It's just,
Yeah, and I have to say another quick thing about that is that I'm not a parent. Every single one of my friends is basically on their second kid by now, so just from a lot of observing of this. Another thing is too, and I learned this myself just being an entrepreneur, but you got to live in the mess. Like, obviously when you have children, especially some of my friends are so type A, and everything's organized and everything's got a schedule, and then the kids, you can't predict, who's going to get sick or who's going to need you, or who's going to fall and hurt themselves, or, all of that stuff. So, you're learning as a parent to live in the mess, and you have to learn that for your career as well. I'm a time management expert. I still struggle sometimes where things pop up and they have to take priority. Family comes first, obviously. And there's boundaries, but then there's also realizing, okay, my kid is sick and I have to stay home and take care of them, and that's that. And so some of my clients will beat themselves up. I didn't get to finish that song, or I didn't do my social media this week as much as I wanted to because my child was sick and I had to take them to the doctor. And I said, okay, but you did what you had to do, right? You didn't just, you were proactive and taking care of what was in front of you, and you did that. So you have to embrace the mess and know, maybe I don't keep to the schedule all the time, but I know that's my structure to go back to. That's what I aim for, and that's what you work towards. You're not always going to get it, and that's okay. Acknowledgement over judgment, and I think we just have to keep repeating that to ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guilt is a handicap, man. It really is.
Yeah, and that scenario happens to me all the time, by the way, because I have 5 kids, not just one, but there's a lot of variables in my household, a lot of variables. And I work with my husband too. So there's a lot going on. And what I think having some time management skills and, programs, like, there's lots of different time, what is it, like project management type software, Asana, and these are, they really help because and I always say the tool doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't matter. It's just like that you have something, you have a plan. And that's the whole reason it's useful, is because life is going to throw curveballs. And if you have kids, you have a lot of curveballs, and then you just get right back on track to where you were, right? It's just like if you're on a diet or something and then you go out to eat and have something you don't normally have. Okay, I don't normally have this. And then you go back to what you were doing right after that, right? It's just get back on track. And then it doesn't have to be so stressful, right? It's just like, I have the plan. Something came up that it doesn't normally happen, and whatever, I'm going to get back on track. I know where I'm going. I know what I'm doing. I know what my goal is, and it's great. And so I just feel like it relieves some of that pressure to have that in place. So, CG and I did a podcast recently on annual planning, actually. And so some of the things I'm doing, I do an annual plan, but then I also do like some quarterly planning. So I'm sticking to like the 90-day thing, because I feel like beyond 90 days it starts to get a little unrealistic. And I have found, you probably can tell me about this, that so many things come up even in a 90-day period of time that completely change what you thought you were going to do. And so I've learned that both in business and in personal life and in my music life, that I plan on, reaching this goal. And if I say I want to be this place a year from now, it's really tough to actually see that happen. Whereas a 90-day goal is within a close enough reach that it's actually kind of attainable. But even then, I got to be willing to pivot and adapt, be very adaptable. That's the one piece of advice I have. So what have you noticed in terms of like goal setting, in terms of timelines and stuff?
Absolutely. I'm 100% agree with you. I first heard of the 90-day sprints from Todd Herman.
I love Todd. He's great.
Yeah, I love his stuff. And I'm the same way. I've been creating the Rockstar Life Planner for about 4 years now. And this past year, we finally put in the front of the book a section about why should I plan out my year if I can't predict it? And because I was having a lot of clients say, well, I spend this time to think about my goals and plan out how my year is going to go, and it never goes as planned. So why should I bother? And all of that stuff. And here's the thing. It's like, I like to plan in pencil, for the year. I don't like to spend too much time doing it, but I spend a little bit of time thinking, what would I like to accomplish in the year? And then doing that, as I'm sure you'll find too, I like to do the quarterly, just as you said, because then I can work backwards and say, well, then what can I take on this quarter? And then what can I take on this month? And then what needs to be done this week and tomorrow and right now? And what I always say to that is, yes, I understand the frustration when you have to pivot or things don't go as planned, and musicians like to usually be more in the moment. But if you're not working backwards, then you don't know the first step to take. So if you're just going to blindly say, oh, I'll do this now, but you don't have an intention of what impact that's going to have, then you're not really doing purposeful action with it. So I like to start with the year, get just basic structure, basic hopes and dreams for it. And then, as you said, once I get to the quarter, let's get real specific. And then every week, at the end of every week, I always reflect on what's happened, what worked, what didn't. Let me look at my monthly goal. Am I still on track? Do I need to change my goal? Because we're learning every day. I'm sure like your students take your course and they learn something new. And in order to not make it a shiny object syndrome, they really have to take a moment and say, wow, that's some really great information. Where do I work that into my plan right now? Do I do that now, or do I finish what I was doing and then I act on what I just learned? It's understanding where things fall in your list of priorities. So it's very important to be okay with the mess, be okay with the pivoting. And it's not you were wrong. That's another, we blame ourselves. Well, I was wrong. I planned for the year and I didn't do what I set out to do. And I stink because I couldn't predict it. You don't know what you don't know until you know it. So as you go, it's not about being wrong. It's just about collecting more data points and being able to make a smarter decision as you go. And it's all about that science experiment mentality of like, I'm going to give it an educated guess. I'm going to experiment, and then I'm going to look at my data and then redo it and do it again in a more specific manner.
It's funny how we introduce the moral question to all of these things. You don't do it, and so I must be something wrong, as if guilt and self-condemnation are going to get you any quicker to your goal. And it's, we could probably go all day with extremely practical and helpful tips about time management, organization, and planning, and you still come back to this initial hurdle of just how much people trip. Life is hard enough as it is. You compound the problem when you're adding this anxiousness about it, That's got to be frustrating a bit for you, right, as a coach, because you're like, okay, this tips that you're giving them could help them so much if you could get them to chill out. Don't take it so seriously. It's not
right. I mean, I was lucky enough when I worked at Atlantic Records, my boss would always say, we're not curing cancer. Like, if you make a mistake, yes, what we can do is very impactful. Music can be very impactful, but, it's okay. The world will live. If I mess up on my podcast, or if I write a blog post and I leave out a tip, or I don't include something, or, I maybe it's not as clear as I hoped it could be. It's like, okay, I have another shot to clarify it, or to edit it, or to go back and update it. Like, there are always things, Marie Forleo, I'm a big fan of hers, and she always, everything is figure-outable. And I spent a year literally every morning repeating that to myself, and it did wonders for my mindset, because I have anxiety too, and I get that way when I'm like, the minute the plan doesn't go as planned, it's like, well, why? What did I do wrong? Or why can't the universe work in my favor? Or, I immediately am like, what are 3 things I'm grateful for? And let me repeat to myself, I will figure this out. There will be a solution. Just keep going. Just keep swimming. Yeah. Keep swimming.
Yeah, why? I guess asking yourself why is never a great way to start a question. Always better to say how. How can I get from not why am I, well, because the obvious answer is going to be, well, because you're a loser. Or at least that's what we'll tell ourselves. Why can't I get this figured out? Because you're a loser. Well, don't ask why. Ask how can I get this figured out? I'll often tell people that because of the concept of worry and anxiousness, which pervades anybody who's trying to do anything great, and is not used to that, going to these next levels of achievement. That worry is just there. It's just there. And I'll often say that worry is self-prayer, and you make a terrible God, because it's as if, you know, you're constantly going over these anxious thoughts in your mind as if somehow you're going to produce an answer that way. So you are almost petitioning yourself, and it never ever seems to work out. And I love what you said about what the record label said. It's, you know, you're not curing cancer. This is, again, we're bringing all this to the table. We're bringing all this extra baggage to something that's actually just very practical. It's a very practical thing. You know, we dress it up like it is. We put the makeup and the dress and everything on and make it more than it is. But it's funny how we do that, man. But especially creative souls, because they are so sensitive.
Do you find musicians and creative people resist these kind of methods at first? Like, are they afraid of structure and boundaries and routine and productivity? Or do you find like, okay, once they get over the hurdle of that, they just like fly? Like, what is your experience in that regard?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the first things that ends up happening is they are resistant at first because they look at boundaries or routines as it'll stifle me. And I'm a musician. I don't know when I'm going to create, and I don't know when I'm going to hit that flow. And so I can't, you know, live in these boxes. One of the things I always say is, you know, boundaries, you have the power to move them, and you can always change them and alter them, but you should have them up to, again, it's all about giving yourself freedom to have a starting point. And if you give yourself too many options and it's a blank canvas that you're working on, you're never going to take that first step, because again, I mean, we're still animals, and animals fear the unknown. So if you don't know what direction or when you're going to make a decision to work on something or put your focus on it, yeah, maybe you'll say Saturday for 2 hours, I'm going to lock myself in the studio and write a song. And maybe you do that and it doesn't work out. Okay, but you tried it, and then you learn from it, and you'll say maybe Saturday afternoons aren't my sweet spot, maybe I just wasn't in the mood that day, or whatever happens. You can then work around it, but you gotta first try it and take action. And the other thing I say to them too is, like, with time blocking, I have my blocks of time kind of all set up. I can always move them. I can always say, oh, that 2 hour thing, I'm going to break it up into 1 hour chunks on these 2 days for this week, because that's what this calls for. And that's what I'm going to do. And I have the power to give myself permission to do that. But I'm not deleting the time blocks. The reason time blocking is so important is because you're giving space to the things that matter. And if you start deleting them and replacing them with stuff, you're, excuse me, I always say to people, it's like when you have a kid and they want your attention, you say, not now, not now. I'm doing this other thing that and you don't give them attention. Eventually, what happens? They start screaming, "Mom!"
They light the house on fire.
Right, exactly. Like, you need to pay attention, and that's that resentment. That's, oh, I don't have time for that, or, oh, yeah, I know I said I'd write for 2 hours on Saturday, but I decided to go do this other collaboration or go to this networking event. And so if you're not moving those 2 hours somewhere else to eventually give it attention, if you're just deleting it, that resentment is growing, and and you're at that networking event, not focusing on making connections, but you're focusing on, I can't believe I have to be here. I should be in my studio. I wanted to be in my studio. I don't want to be here. Rather than, okay, I'm going to do this now, and I'll do my studio later this evening rather than this afternoon, because this was also important. You know, understanding that there's a compromise and that there's a lot more flexibility in routines than people think. And one of my clients, Karina, she's a wonderful singer-songwriter. We spoke a lot. She was one of my first clients with the Rockstar Advocate, and we talked a lot about post-tour depression and what a real thing it is, and how, you know, you're on the road and every day is different, living at a pace, and then you come home and it's the daily grind, or it's the responsibilities waiting for you and all that stuff. And that transition is really difficult. What she started to do after 12 national tours that she booked for herself, she realized, well, I need a routine. I need to be centered and grounded, because again, we might find fun and exhilaration in the the different day-to-days, but again, we're creatures, and creatures need habits, and creatures need structure. Baby, you got to get your baby on a sleep schedule. Kids go to school for the same hours every day. They have math and gym and science at the same times every day. There's a reason for that. So we don't just grow out of needing that. So doing routines, like every morning she does yoga, she meditates for 10 minutes, and she journals for 20 minutes. And that stays the same, and that enables her to ground herself while she is changing environments, while she's on tour, while she's, taking on other projects. So routines can be more freeing than they initially seem to be.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you describe me so much. Like I am that. To give everybody hope, I am the artist that says, I hate schedules. I don't like routine. I have no idea what I'm going to create. In fact, over the last few years, when I've been trying to like make albums and grow Savvy Musician Academy, this was a huge conundrum because I'm like, my brain is going to internally combust because I'm like trying to, I'm in different headspaces all the time. I'm trying to make an album. How the heck do we make this work? So I have really been there. And yes, routine is everything. And actually it really impacted me. Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art, where he said, in regards to like blocking time and just showing up and doing it, the difference between an amateur and a professional is the professional shows up no matter what they feel like, and they sit down and they do their work. Even if not a single word came out of your pen, if you sat down to write, you sit down and think, and you just be there, right? So, and within that, still having flexibility, and to this day, that's it. So I've got my major time blocks right now as far as working on my album and SMA. But within there's flexibility. There's some days where I'm like, so on, normally a Wednesday would be a music day. Today, I actually have to do an extra thing for Savvy Musician Academy. No big deal. I just carry on, and then we pick up where we were the next week, and we don't delete the time blocks, just like you said. So guys, just to give you hope out there, I am that artist where I feel extremely artsy fartsy. If I could do it, have my way, I would do everything on the fly and on the seat of my pants. That's how I roll. But the boundaries have given me freedom. And just like an artist, an artist needs to work with a canvas. There's borders around the canvas. They're not just like painting in infinity. There's structure to it. There's a border around the edge. There's edges where they go off the canvas and now you're on nothing. So within the boundaries comes creativity. That's what I found. So I just love everything you're saying. It's really cool. I feel like you've got us nailed down.
Yeah, I've spent my whole life around musicians, and I have such respect, and I'm always so in awe how vulnerable musicians are. And I try to be vulnerable to them with the lessons I've learned in mental health and with other things in my life. But to take something so intimate and put it out there for people to share, I'm just in awe of it. So I learn from musicians every day, and if there's anything I could ever give back, it's like awesome. So.
That's awesome. Well, if you could leave us with like one main tip, like if you had to leave people with like one big thing that they could do right now that would make a big difference, what would that be?
I would say to give themselves permission to be kinder to themselves. I think a lot of people, like when they hire me, they expect me to be all tough love and kick their butts. And sometimes I do, but a lot of it's just, I'm always reminding them to forgive themselves and, give yourself, understand you're not planning in a 24-hour day. Understand that you're going to do the best you can, and maybe just plan to get one thing done tomorrow that's important to you, that's going to move your career forward, and then go from there. And I think that's the most you should do, rather than, if I really want this, I have to grind and hustle. It's like, just take a breath. And I think you'll get a lot further than you think you will.
That's awesome. And if someone was interested in, like you mentioned, you have a planner and everything. Actually, I've got it right here on my desk.
Oh.
It's really cool. And I really enjoyed going through it and just seeing everything you had in there. I think it could really help a lot of people for sure who need the physical, like write it down kind of, planner, life planner. And it's really comprehensive. So you did a great job on that. If people are interested in learning more about that and what you do, where can they go?
Yeah, so you'll find all of that and more on my homepage at therockstaradvocate.com. And thank you so much for those kind words, because I'm a big fan, so that means a lot coming from you. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was just real pleasure having you. I'd love to have you back and do something follow up, because man, you've got us nailed down to a T. I mean, you know us. So yeah, I would love to have you back. Any closing thoughts, DJ?
No, I think that's wonderful, Suzanne. Like I said, I can just jive with so much about your approach, and because I think it's practical, and you're focusing on those things that really trip everybody up, and it's really the simple stuff. You know, we get tripped up by the simple stuff, and just the fact that you're alleviating these things. You know, I kind of put you then in that category with Leah, where I think, you know, I've often said about Leah and what she's doing with SMA, this is the most important thing to develop since Napster. Since Napster initiated the collapse, if you will, of the music industry, she's the first thing to come about that produces a real change, and gives musicians hope again that they could do things. But with that comes a tremendous amount of work. And, you know, when I first joined her in her group as a coach, the first thing she said to me was Overwhelm, that was the main thing that was just, you know, just really doing a job on these students. And so I love your approach to it, and because it's such a practical way for them to hack their own little psychology and move forward, that they can achieve success. They can experience so much more than they even imagine. And it's something to be excited about, not something to be anxious about or worried about, or to, as you said, stand in your own way with self-sabotage. So I think that's awesome. Awesome.
Thank you so much. And hope, I would love to have you on my podcast as well. I'm just a big fan of what you both do. And yeah, I'm very excited to have had a chance to speak to both of you today.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Absolutely. We'll definitely set that up. So thank you again, Suzanne. And I hope everybody listening in that you got something out of this, and you know that you're not alone in feeling some of these challenges and facing these challenges, that this is part and parcel of who we are and what we're doing in today's music business. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, thanks once again for joining us here on the Savvy Musician Show. Please go and like and review this podcast. Help us get up in the rankings, and we will see you online. Take care.
This episode was sponsored by the Superfan System Elite program here at Savvy Musician Academy. If you are looking to scale your existing music business and you're looking to get into advanced digital marketing, such as email marketing, funnels, e-commerce, Facebook ads, and more, and you're looking to build a real profitable online music business, book a call with our team at www.callsma.com. We would love to speak with you for about 30 minutes and see how we can help you. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more episodes, and we'll see you next time.